Hi, so as Kate said, I'm Alan Cameron, and today I'm just going to take you through my process of working as a graphic designer and with a client. So I'm going to take you from getting the brief, getting that through, and then delivering the final piece of work. So be that a kind of logo design or layout design or digital design, whatever it is just getting it to the client at the in the allotted time, which inevitably will be much less time than what you are wanting or needing to get the work done. So yeah, I'd say I'm going to go through my process because as a designer, everyone's different. All designers are different, and everyone has a different process and way of working. And by no means is kind of what I'm going to go through today a kind of set of hard rules. But it's a process that's kind of worked for me over the past 10 years as I've worked as a freelancer. So firstly, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the kind of work that I do and the kind of design that I do. And kind of how I got to here. And then I'm going to take you through a case study of a logo that I've been working on recently. So it'll just be a kind of, I'll show you the logo as it kind of in its finished form, and then I'll take you back to when I got the brief, what the process was in terms of doing the research, what the process was in terms of kind of developing ideas. And then finally, I'll take you into Adobe Illustrator and show you my kind of workflow process within Illustrator to create that logo. So again, every designer is different in terms of how they work within Adobe programs. But I'll show you how I work, and hopefully that will give you some tips. So yeah, as Katie said, if you've got any questions as we go along, just put them in the chat box, and she'll fire them at the end. Right, I'm just going to share. You cannot start sharing your screen while others are sharing.
2 seconds. Let me check why that should be, because you should be able to share screen.
Stove Network is sharing sound.
Oh, I'll stop sharing. There we go. That should be it. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. There we are. Okay, where are we? So, okay, everyone see that? So this is my portfolio website. Most projects are from the past kind of 3 to 4 years. There's a couple that are older than that, but this is generally the kind of design I've been working on for the past few years, which has mostly been branding, identity jobs, that kind of thing. But usually within that, there's a more detailed kind of document layout work, or something that's a bit more kind of nitty gritty design work, which is sometimes kind of the less glamorous side of graphic design, but it's certainly got its challenges. And yeah, so as a freelancer, it's not to be dismissed, that's for sure. And there's lots of different types of design within graphic design. Graphic design isn't just a kind of all-encompassing kind of platform within itself. So there's certain things like UX design, which is kind of quite a new term, which is user experience design. So that's how people kind of use websites and apps and things like that, and how the graphics work within that. There's layout design, like I mentioned, and identity design. There's things like packaging design, and again, more recently, motion graphic design, which is the kind of things that you can see these GIFs working here in the background. So that's just a very small kind of example of motion graphic design. I'll show you some layout design that I've been working on. This is the World Wide Web Foundation, which is a client I've been working with for the past kind of 3 years. So it was funded by or set up by Tim Berners-Lee, who discovered the web. And so, yeah, it was a project that I was brought on to design these funding cards. It was quite a fun project to take their kind of branding and apply it to quite what could traditionally be quite a boring document, but making it quite fun to look at. But then within that, you can see there's much more detailed work that kind of comes alongside jobs like that. So this is a more traditional document layout job, which has its own challenges. So I studied at I'll just go through a few of the projects while I'm chatting here. I studied at the Glasgow School of Art. I graduated in 2010. But I didn't study graphic design. I actually studied illustration. So it was illustration within a visual communications course. So it was design orientated, but it was very much a kind of illustration course. So I'm not a classically trained designer. It wasn't until I left art school that I kind of realized that, well, I needed to make money. And it was graphic design that kind of started presenting itself to me as a means of doing that. The people that I was hanging about with at the time were in bands and needing album artwork and gig posters and logos and things like that. And while a lot of that work kind of was done for free or for very little money at the time, it kind of got me the kind of portfolio I needed to get jobs that eventually started to kind of pay the bills. Yeah, so I think there is a lot to say for when you're starting out. Taking jobs for free can sometimes be considered kind of a bit taboo, but if you're just starting out and you've got no portfolio, it's certainly a good way to start making work and to start producing artwork, because you kind of need to be able to be making work in order to be getting work. And certainly, I know there's some designers that started off by kind of creating their own projects and creating their own briefs. So they would kind of imagine a client, like a kind of fantasy client, and then produce a project based on that. But that was just not the kind of way that I was working at the time, and actually it kind of worked for me quite well, because I through doing this work quite early on, I ended up meeting quite a lot of people that then led to quite a lot of paid work, which was yeah, just a kind of fortuitous way of starting, really. What it also allowed me to do was kind of learn the tools of my trade. I think it gave me the freedom to kind of play about with the Adobe softwares that I would then go on to be using every day. So the InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop, these were tools that weren't really taught to me during art school. I spent 4 years at art school, and I think we had 2 days on Adobe learning software, which these days is kind of crazy, and I certainly hope they give more than that. I think we had 1 day on Photoshop and 1 day on InDesign, and I'm not that old. Like it wasn't that long ago. You kind of would have thought that you would have been given more than that, but certainly, yeah, it was sink or swim. It was a kind of, learn this stuff on your own time, or don't learn it at all. And when you graduate, another thing they don't teach you at art school is that you need to make money. And when I graduated, I realized that I really needed to know these tools in order to kind of create these things. But there's Katie on my website right there. It's the Mid Steeple Quarter project. A lot of you guys might know of it if you're local, based in Dumfries. And yeah, so I did the branding for them back in, I think, 2016 it was when they first started out, and I've been doing layout jobs for them since then as well, which yeah, just a great project to be a part of. So yeah, coming into graphic design from a more kind of fluid way of thinking, in terms of kind of studying illustration, I think it's given me ability to approach briefs in a more kind of creative and a bit more of a holistic way. For instance, this meaningful connectivity project. This was a project. So the Alliance for Affordable Internet is connected to the Web Foundation. Excuse me, and is affiliated with them. And this is a project that, you know, they're trying to get internet into parts of the world that don't have access reliably to the internet. It's the kind of yeah, it's a great project. But they came to me and said, we're just trying to brand this project, and I kind of approached them and said, well, why don't we do it as more of a kind of illustrative project, so that there's more like we can make it a bit more of a dynamic thing for when we bring it into social media, you can play about with it. So it can start having these, you're kind of building these structures based on the devices illuminating the world. And that means that you can pull it apart and you can put it back together, and it worked really well as a project, and it's kind of gone on to do really interesting things. So yeah, being able to kind of approach projects with a more illustrative kind of point of view has sometimes, I think, led me to kind of more interesting outcomes than I maybe would have had I just been a kind of traditionally trained graphic designer. And I think also these days clients are looking for that within people being self-employed. If they're hiring a freelancer, for me to be able to offer illustration and branding and layout, and I'd even do videography, then like for a prospective employer to look at that and say, oh, actually that's going to save us a lot of time and money and communication trying to find somebody else to do all that, it's actually makes you quite an appealing prospect. But I think the thing you've got to keep an eye on when you're doing you're putting all those different hats on, is that you've got to make sure that your quality kind of stays the same consistently throughout all those different outcomes, and also make sure that you're being paid appropriately, because if there's one thing also as a freelancer, people will try and take advantage of you and try and kind of pinch your pocket. So this is a few more logos that I've done through the years, just very different projects, all kind of based on just branding, from the arts organizations to charities to companies to personal branding. But I think the thing that's interesting, kind of looking through them, is the different styles that kind of run through all the logos. There's none that are exactly the same kind of style, and I believe that as a designer, it's not my job to kind of put my style into a project. It's the job of a designer is to kind of extract the style from the project, and kind of bring that to the fore of the design. So for instance, with the Galloway Hills Network, you know, this is a project that's based on land use and conservation and farming and working with your hands. So making the shapes, you know, out of ripped paper and hand drawing the font, and using wood as a way of printing a texture into the background, all kind of speaks to these things. And as soon as you see that design, you're already starting to understand where that project lies and what kind of work you're kind of expecting to see as soon as you see that logo. And I think to apply something like this to the Galloway Hills network maybe wouldn't work so well, because it's much slicker and shinier, and this is a community-based project, trying to get kids more interested in sports rather than sitting at home playing computer games. So I went down a kind of more kind of football brand kind of aesthetic with that. So you can imagine it on the shirt of a kid, running through the park. But yeah, kind of letting the themes of the project come out through the design is quite an important part of what you do as a designer. Right, I'm just going to change the screen share here if I can do that. There we go. Do that. New share. Okay, so I'm going to show you this logo. So this is let me just take a drink. This is a logo I've been working on in the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to show you my process. It's quite a traditional logo. It's not really the kind of thing that I usually produce, but it's got quite a lot of interesting elements within it, that I thought would be interesting for you guys to kind of see, both from an illustrative point of view and a design point of view. And it's got shape building and image tracing, which are elements within Illustrator that I think are quite important. I'll talk about Illustrator, as a tool. You obviously have to pay for Adobe software, and not everyone is able to do that, and not everyone wants to do that, especially when they're starting out. So there are free versions of Illustrator, which is it's a vector drawing tool. So there are free versions of that that you can get online. But if you're kind of going into a graphic design career, then I think eventually you will lead yourself to the Adobe software. So I'm going to show you Adobe Illustrator because that's what I use every day, and it's how I work. But there are free versions out there that will have similar kind of tools and similar ways of working. So this job came to me from a previous client. So I'd done work for her in the past. And I mean, this is what I love about working. I'm based in Galloway. I live just on the coast down from Dalbeattie. And what I love working in a rural environment is you get jobs like this. Like, I don't think there's many graphic designers working in London that are rebranding a flock of sheep. And it's just great getting jobs like this. It just it gives you something different to work on, especially when you've been doing a document layout job that can be a little bit grueling at times, when you're just inputting text into a document. So to be given a job like this is great fun, and it's the kind of thing that I really enjoy doing. It's the kind of thing I would do for a bit less. I mean, don't tell the clients that, but I would do for a bit less because it's good fun. So the brief came through. Briefs kind of come through in all shapes and sizes. Some come through in formal documents. The bigger the company that you're working with, the kind of more formal the approach. Some come through just in emails, but because I'd worked with this woman in the past and she had my number, she just texted it to me, and it was literally just a text saying, I've got a new flock of sheep and I need a brand for them. So that's not much to go on. That's all the information I had for the job. So obviously I kind of needed to follow that up with a phone call. And I think it's kind of important to treat every brief the same, no matter how it comes through. And the thing that's most important is to really understand what it is that the client is looking for. Because if you kind of just take that text, that kind of one-liner, and run off on a tangent, kind of creating a design for a sheep brand that you've got in your head that you have no real foundation based on, you're going to put all that time and effort into a job that then she's going to say that's not what I had in mind. So the real kind of skill with briefs is to ask the right questions, to extract that information from the client so that everyone's on the same page, and you kind of know where you're starting from. So, some good questions to kind of start with are like, who is the target audience? Where is this? Who is going to be seeing this brand, and what's it looking to do? Like, whose eye are you trying to catch? Where is the design going to be used? Is it going to be teeny tiny on the corner of an Instagram page, or is it going to be on the side of a van, or is it going to just be on a letterhead? You kind of need to know the scale of how this is going to work, and a good logo should be able to do all of those things regardless. So you should be planning for those eventualities when you are doing your designs regardless. But it's good to know what it's going to be used for, and what's the scope of the project. So is it just a logo, or are you going to be using this in social media? Is it going to be for print? Is there going to be extra work that kind of comes from the logo design? What's the deadline, which is a very important one. That's kind of quite an important question to ask up front. And do you have a particular style in mind? This is something that I've come across quite often, where clients come to you, say, I want a logo designed, and this is what I have in my mind, and this is the kind of style that I want it done in. And sometimes you can push back on that and say, actually, I disagree. I don't think that's the right way to go, and try and convince them otherwise, and give them a set of research that you can then say, well, this is why I think you should go in a different direction. In this case, the client had a pretty strong idea of what she wanted, and I didn't really disagree. I thought it was probably a good way to go down. So when I asked what style she had in mind, she said vintage American screen print. So that kind of gave me a real strong basis of where to start when it came to research. So I'll share. Change my share screen. I'll share my research page. Here. So I started looking at these old classic Scottish railway posters, because landscape and screen print, when you put those two words in my head, this is what popped into my mind. They're very traditional. You see them all over the place, but you start pulling out some quite strong stylistic tendencies from them. So these big kind of chunky blocks of shape, and yeah, the clouds were something that I kind of started paying attention to. So that was quite a strong wealth of information and kind of research to pull from. And so this is research imagery that I would collect and put together and send to the client and say, this is kind of how I'm thinking of going with this. This is the kind of themes and colors and ideas that I'm kind of having. How does this fit with your idea of what you were thinking of? And you know, sometimes they'll text, you know, they'll message back and say, no, that's not what I'm looking for at all. And you know, usually back in the day, I would have been able to sit down and I would be able to have a sit down chat with people and, you know, actually meet them face to face, which is always a better way of working. But these days, a lot of it's, you know, all online and this kind of stuff as well. So I started looking at other branding jobs as well, just to kind of give me an idea of layout, shapes, and different ways of kind of getting that sense of ruralness across as well. And then kind of looking at more old school graphics, just to see how, you know, it's kind of, when you're doing research, it's not about, you know, trying to find something to rip off. It's about trying to pull out little kind of tidbits of information from each bit of research and kind of collecting all these little nuggets and then collecting that together to produce a finished piece. So, you know, it's maybe this kind of slightly worn approach, something that I could bring into the design. These little lines here, maybe just pulling out little nuggets like that. Looking at different ways of imaging sheep. Just different, kind of going down almost like a beer labels line there. You know, you can imagine them on the side of a bottle. Different kind of old hand-drawn text starting making me think of, and those kind of things. And is that a style that will work for this, or do we need to be more structured? And I like this one, you know, with the kind of using illustrative elements as well. So this is a kind of, you know, a set of images that I would be quite happy to send to a client and say, you know, is this a kind of theme that you're happy working towards? And then they would, you know, say yay or nay. I'll show you what I'm going to do is kind of deviate from this and show you some other areas and some other websites that I use for research. I just thought it'd be interesting to see, where are we? Let's see, page to share. There it is. Yeah, to see some other designers and places to look when you're doing research like that. That was quite a traditional kind of image. So I kind of, when I was doing my research, I went to books and I went to old screen prints and something, you know, a bit more traditional. Whereas if I'm researching something a bit more contemporary, a bit more modern, then going to websites like It's Nice That, which is a great collection of articles of contemporary work, looking back at design and photography and video, all sorts of visual imagery, and it kind of collates it all together and is a really well curated website. So it's the standard of work is really high, and it's just a great inspiration. It's a great place to kind of to go to just delve in and just spend a couple hours just absorbing other people's work and absorbing how other people work and kind of learning from that as well. It's really a kind of wealth of knowledge, and it's got a good search bar. So if you're searching for a project in particular, so you know, you can type in sheep and see what comes up. And there might be something in there that would relate to the project. I mean, probably for the project I'm talking about, probably not. But you never know, and it's always worth kind of looking through. There might be a little nugget of something visually that kind of sparks an idea. So that's one website that's really good to look at for research. Behance is another one. So again, I typed in 1950s farm logo, and you start picking out just little things like that, just that kind of screen printed imagery, that screen printed style was really something that as soon as you type those words in, it is a kind of known imagery that goes within that style. But you start seeing what's out there, and you start seeing what doesn't work. The thing about Behance is it's not curated. This is just people putting their work out there. So there's a lot of crap in here. There's a lot of stuff to sift through. There's some great work, but there's also a lot of crap. But there's usually always something in here that you can pull out as a good kind of source of research. So it's certainly not to be overlooked. But yeah, you literally could scroll for days on each topic. And I think if you are getting into Adobe, I think you get you can then get a free Behance subscription, and you can then start putting your work out there as well. I've not done that yet, but I don't know. I don't know if that would be a good means of getting work, is people seeing it through that. Instagram, I find actually is a really good source of research. I keep kind of, you can save the imagery. So I keep a folder for design and just things that I see that I think, oh, that's a good way of laying out, or a good, it just kind of keeps you, it's almost like a kind of scrapbook. Like it's back in when I was in art school, I would have had an actual sketchbook, and I would have cut things out and stuck them in if I saw them. But these days it's just much easier to just use your thumb and just pop it in. This is a good source, actually. This is the Adobe Alternatives. So if you're looking for, Illustrator is what I'm going to look through today. So these are some free options for Illustrator, and you've got similar things for Photoshop as well. It might be worth just noting them down if you're interested. And then also other designers obviously are a huge source of inspiration. So Pentagram is one of the biggest brands and design agencies in the world, if not the biggest, I think. They've got an office in New York and London, and just the standard of work that comes out of there is just fantastic. And it's just really, it's important to kind of keep an eye on these kind of things, like as a designer, to kind of see where the general styles are kind of moving. Not that I think you should follow styles, but just keeping an eye on these things as they progress is quite an important thing to do. So yeah, there's just loads of imagery so again, looking at, so just clicking on that, because again, talking about screen printed stuff. So if I was to be doing research based on this, you see this text, and instantly that makes you think, well, it looks like it's been screen printed. So you start thinking about, oh, is there color overlays and transparencies that I can work with within this project? And that just sparks a little idea that you can then just pocket away and think about for later on in the project, and just gives you another way of kind of working. Closer to home is D8. So these guys are based in Glasgow. Really great work. So it's all very kind of commercial branding stuff, but very slick and well put together. These guys, Mother, I think they're based in New York. again, I liked all their motion graphics. I thought I nicked that idea from my website. But again, really strong work, and the use of color, I think, on this website is quite obvious straight away. Like they've not got a kind of color palette they pull on for each project. You can tell like each project is given its own color palette based on what it is, and that goes back to what I was talking about before in terms of giving each project its own identity based on what it is. Bow Street, again, these guys are Glasgow based, so they did a lot of work with the banknotes, the recent designs, and the Glasgow Film Festival, which I think this has been a really cool rebrand for the festival. Again, very illustrative. This guy, Matt Boyce, this is a guy that works, he basically just does these kind of text-based works that are all motion graphics. So they're very, very watchable. You could just sit and watch them all day. But it's got me really interested in this kind of style of making things move, because I think more and more that's kind of how the design world is moving. Like your graphic design is going to be needing to be flexible, and it's going to have to be able to move, and it's going to have to be able to be in this kind of world where everything's flashing and moving, and how do you do that in a really interesting way. So this is through After Effects that he's been doing all this stuff, and After Effects is a bit of software that I have tried to get my head around, but it is a struggle, I have to say. But it's the kind of thing, it's practice makes perfect with these things, and I struggled with Illustrator when I started with it, but you just keep putting in the time and making work even for yourself, and eventually you'll get to the point where you're able to kind of create stuff that you're really proud of. Aaron Draplin Design Co. He's a great one to watch. He's really good in terms of kind of teaching, and he's got great workshops and stuff online. But I just love his bold branding style. He's got always got a really good chunky line. It's quite, like, in terms of having a style, like you could probably pick out one of his logos from a good distance. And then Malika Favre, in terms of illustration, she's just, in terms of graphic illustration, she's just one of the best. I mean, her styles are just beautiful. So yeah, just in terms of research, like that's kind of where I would start off when I get a new project in, and kind of just trying to absorb myself with visual imagery that you can then start just pulling out tiny little threads from each one and kind of creating something new out of it. So where are we now? So what I will do next, I'm going to jump into Illustrator. So the next step really is sketching. Really, once you've got your head around the research part of it, is getting into the sketching and getting into just getting your ideas down on paper. And I really think that paper and pencil is the best way to go. So, I get a big sheet of paper and just start doodling away. And I really think it's the only way to do it. And just coming up with all your ideas, just sketching them down, making them big, small, and just playing with different shapes. And once you've kind of done that process, and once you've kind of played around and traced bits and redrawn it, and you'll start pulling out a good sense of what shape this logo is going to take before you even get into Illustrator, before you kind of come to the point of assembling it. And kind of once you've done that, then you like sometimes even I would just take a wee picture off a sketch and just bring it into Illustrator straight from my phone, and then you can kind of change the transparency of that, knock it back, and then just sketch over it. Is a really good way to get going. But what I'll show you is, so a lot of designers would kind of use just the trackpad and the paint tools within Illustrator to make mark making. But I always find that actually doing the marks by hand is a much better way. You get a much kind of gnarlier quality of line, which I think is quite important to hold on to. I mean, certainly for some projects, maybe for others, you would just drawing straight onto Illustrator would be a better way to go. But you can see, so you can see here, like I actually, painted that onto a bit of paper and then scanned it in. And this tree line is something that the client also mentioned that she wanted in the design. So she lives on this farm, and that is the tree line, and she says it's quite iconic for the area, and it's something that she really wanted in the design. So that within itself already starts throwing challenges into the design, because you're thinking, right, well, I've got this sheep that obviously has to be the main focus of the design, but I've also got this tree line that needs to be a part of it. And how do you keep them separately? Or do you, can you have the sheep on top, and then that's going to get in the way of the tree line? So it starts bringing in challenges within itself. But I'll just show you a quick way. So once you've brought that into Illustrator, you can see it's just, it's a pixelated, it's a scan, but it's not a great quality scan. So there's not much you can kind of do with that as it is. So what you would then do is go to zoom bars in the way there, would go to image trace. So you select your image there, go to image trace, sketch start, and you can see that's just instantly turned that into a vector image. So that's turned it from being my kind of hand-drawn painted imagery to, something that is completely smooth, and you can zoom right in there and there's no pixels to be seen. So from that, you can see, I've not quite got that that kind of, there must have been a lighter point on the scan, but you can play about with a threshold and really push that up, and then that starts kind of locking in. You can go too far with it, or you pull the threshold right back. You can see you're starting losing detail. So you kind of play around with this threshold and start pulling out bits, enough detail without going too far with it. So I'm starting to get some weird shapes coming out there. So I'm just going to pull it back a bit. And once you've done that, click expand, and then that's you got your shapes ready to use. So if I, wanted to just select that, so I can then pull that out, and that's a separate shape within itself. I don't need that, so I can just delete it. Okay, so that's my kind of illustrative marks that I'm kind of ready to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this guy in to use as a, so I'm going to just flatten that so it doesn't go weird when I shrink it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building this shape in order to kind of be the structure of the logo. So you'll see there's no shape tool here that's the exact shape that I want. So then you've got to build your own shape, basically. So what I want to do is draw a big circle there. And then a couple of rectangles just to stick on the end and trim them off. So I've drawn one there. And then I can just duplicate that and pull it over. What I'll do is I'll just group them, select the circle, and just align them. Selection, just to make sure that these rectangles are right in the center of that circle. So making sure I've got them all selected, I can then click the shape builder tool. It's a great tool, and when I first discovered it, it blew my mind. Being self-taught, it takes you a while to come across these tools sometimes, but when you do, it kind of changes how you work. So then I've gone from having a circle to a bespoke shape, which you can just keep, because it might be that you want to come back and change that at some point. And the thing about vectors is they're free, so just don't scrimp on them. You can always go back to it and change it, but take it, copy it, and go from there. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to round those edges. So selecting that, I'm sure what this arrow is called. Direct selection tool. There you go. You'll learn something new. So just selecting those corners, I'll just redo that. Selecting the shape as a whole, and then you're then able to get these little, you see the arrow there, just allows you to kind of curve any sharp points. You can select them individually, or you can do them all as a kind of oneer. And then there's me got a kind of rough shape to start with for the logo. So from there, I don't want this big black color, so I'm just gonna put the color from the fill into the stroke. So that's making it transparent in the middle. So if I were to take this over here, you can see through it. And the stroke is just the line off the path itself. And then you can play with the thickness of the path as well. So just making that a bit thicker. And from there, you can select the color as well. So that's us got our basis of the shape. What I'm then going to do is bring in the cloud element so that we've got that to play with. So I'm just going to, and so you can see it's just this squiggly line at the moment, and it doesn't really make much sense visually. But again, this is where the shape builder comes into play. So I can select these two layers, select the shape builder, and so the shape builder, you can either plus or minus. So if you see the cursor there, there's a plus there, but if I hold Alt, there's a minus. I've made that square too big. It needs to within the boundary of the other shape. So when I select the shape builder, I can, minus the top or the bottom there. So I'm just going to take that off and then just make that into one shape and just trim those edges off as well. And that's us got a kind of rough cloud shape now. So just select the color for that, knock it behind that shape. So using the command and square shortcuts is something that you will just learn through doing. You can have a long list of shortcuts that you can try and follow, but it's not until you're actually working with these tools every day that you'll start picking up the shortcuts and start using them every day. Yeah, there's probably shortcuts that I could use, but I don't. But yeah, mine kind of putting layers to the front and back is one that is very helpful within Illustrator. And from there I can start, if this cloud shape isn't quite right, I can manipulate it now. So, you know, I can use the direct select tool and play about with how that cloud shape works. So using each of these anchor points, I can then kind of finesse the rough hand drawing that I did earlier and start making it into something that will sit happily within the logo. So there's a rough cloud. Let's start bringing in some of these cloud highlight sections. So I'm just copying these pieces because it's always good to keep hold of them live as well, and making sure that they are always there in case I need to use them again. So I just make them same color but slightly different, just so that they can. A bit too dark. There. So you can start seeing already this is, you know, been taken inspiration from those screen prints that we looked at the very beginning. And you can start seeing the kind of screen print style starting to kind of come through, which is those big blocks of color and chunky kind of hand-drawn lines. So again, I'm just gonna I'm gonna get the blue of the sky. I'll just pinch that from there. And again, how do I make that shape? I select the path of the boundary and the blue shape itself, and then using the shape builder tool, and there it is. So you can see that is, you know, that's there. It's just sat behind the blue path there. So we're starting to get somewhere here. So give me some grass to play with. It's not gonna work. I'll do a similar here. Okay, so that's us got our kind of top layer of the logo done. So now it's time to kind of think about that text box and how that's going to sit on top of the crest. Another way to kind of copy the style of another shape is to just use the eyedropper tool, and that just will give you that same thickness of line. And then you can chuck a color into the fill as well. And again, with the bottom half, we're just gonna take all these. Pop them in there. So again, I would be taking more time over this if I was just doing it myself. trimming off all those ends here. Them. Oh, selected that. Just going to group them so I can select them all together rather than individually. And then I'll just drag this down, make it a darker green. Oh, sorry. Drop that back there. Kind of roughly just chucking this back here. Give us some cloud shapes. And then time to put in that all important tree line that the client requested. Okay, so it's not quite exactly as finesse as the finished version, but it's getting there. So font is something to consider here. So again, talking about the style of this project. So the brand of the sheep is called Stair Star. Don't ask me why. Don't question the client. That's what it's called. That's what it's called. So we want this to be quite bold and punchy, and we're kind of thinking about it being a traditional design. So using something really slick, trying to think of a slick font, you know, something like Arial. I mean, Arial is just a bit of a boring font to use for anything, but you know, it's kind of a bit too sharp. It doesn't hark back to anything traditional. So, you know, looking at this kind of stuff is, you're imagining this, you know, back in the Wild West, painted on the side of a big barn or something. You know, those kind of imagery start coming to mind. Please don't use chalk duster, whatever you do. So what did I use for this? Bearplex. So one of the perks of Adobe, I feel like I'm an Adobe salesman. I'm totally not. I'm just, you know, it is a tool that it is very useful. But if you are on the Adobe Cloud, which is where you download all your Adobe software from, that gives you access to this, I think it's the Adobe font. And you can download hundreds of different fonts, which is a really, really good source to pull from when you're a designer, to have all these kind of different fonts to play with. So this is what I kind of ended up, because it's got hints of that kind of the oldie Wild West kind of style, but it's not like in your face. And it kind of worked for me for this design. So within that, I mean, it's all very well to just type that out and say, right, that's a design, but it's not. You know, you need to go in. I think actually, quite like to change the case on that. So you can change case just up here. You just go to uppercase, and that just rather than retyping it. And then you need to think about your kerning. So kerning is my wife hates me talking about kerning because I'm obsessed with it. But when you see once you see bad kerning on designs out in the world, it starts to really niggle at you. But it's the space between your letters, and yeah, it can, some letters sit nicely side by side, like this T and this A are got a really nice kind of quality going on, because the T kind of has this outer slope, and the A has this inner slope. But then you've got this A with the inner slope, and this I going straight up, and there's a slight disconnect there. So it's about finessing each letter, and not just leaving it up to the computer. You're kind of going in and just making sure that each letter has the right space around it, because a computer will do it very mathematically, and that works sometimes. But in terms of the human eye, you're going to pull out relationships that a computer won't. So it's about seeing the distance between the T here and the A here, and then the A here and the I here is just a bit jarring. So maybe you would start moving that A closer to that I just a little bit, just to kind of trick the human eye into kind of seeing it spatially working a lot better. But for the purposes of this, that shall do. Make it a little bit bigger. And in terms of fonts, so I've got the Dutch spotted sheep element to add to the bottom of it as well. I wouldn't use the same font. Using two fonts is quite a nice thing to do, because it gives the eye a natural separation, and yeah, makes it easier to kind of read. I think I went for Affogato, which I just think is a great name for a font. So you can see that starting to come together. I might want to make the kerning a bit wider on that, just so it's in the same kind of width as the type at the top. So there we go. We've got that coming together there. So there's one glaring omission here, and that is Mr. Sheep. Now, I'm going to show you some more final versions of this logo that I did for the client, and you'll notice that the sheep is very different. So this is the kind of the final sheep here. So this was something that where communication with the client didn't go 100% well, and I'll show you why. So this is the final sheep, and this was my interpretation of the image that she sent, which I think that's quite a regal looking sheep. I think it kind of worked quite well with the style of what we were talking about. It's got that kind of illustrative quality. But when you're messing with somebody's sheep, you got to really, I didn't realize that I was not quite hitting all the exact qualities of the Dutch spotted sheep brand. So yeah, I had to go back to the drawing board and create something that was much more, it had all the quality. Apparently Dutch spotted sheep have big bums. That had to be part of the design. And yeah, just making it a bit more realistic, because I mean, this is what she's selling. She's selling these sheep. That is, maybe if it was a brand of beer, then the other sheep would work well. But this is her product, so she wants it to look as good as it can, which is totally fair enough. So again, we're going to image trace here, sketched art, and you can see it looks nothing like what it turns out to look like. I'm just going to push the threshold a bit here to get a bit more depth and color, and then expand. So that's good. My shapes here, and then within that I can try and fill in some of these colors. Not that. Here's my paint. So you can start. I can start filling in these. You'll have all used a paint tool in some kind of software or other. It's very similar to that. You might not be able to do all of them because if it's got an open path like that, you wouldn't be able to color that in. But it'll certainly speed things up. So so that gives us our rough sheet layout there. Extra shape. And then what I do for this, so this shape, you can see I can't fill in this shape, the white of the body, because it's not a completed path. So what I'm going to do is just paint a rough shape under, kind of on top of it, but then place that in the backdrop. Okay. So just changing the size of the paintbrush here with the same keys as the layer changing, which is the square brackets. So you can see this, I'm being quite rough here. I would be more finessed. Sheep's eyes are really weird. I don't know if you've looked closely into a sheep's eye, but it's quite a difficult thing to illustrate. Yeah, they've got really weird eyes. So I'm not sure I've quite got the eyes right yet. We'll see what the client says, because I've not actually gone back to her with the revised version. So we shall see. Right, so I'm just gonna flatten those images. Another way of kind of making shapes is to use the Pathfinder over here. So shape modes, you can use unite or merge, and that merges all these kind of rough marks together. And then can I just put that behind? Boom. So very roughly done, but you get the idea of what you can then do with that. Again, keep things live, so I would keep that there and then just copy it. So a good way of copying is just holding the Alt button and just bringing it down. Alt and click. I just want to get it on top of there. So, oh, yeah, constrain proportions. Never do that. Always hold Shift when you're moving an object, because if you don't, then you do that, and badly constrained proportions is one of the worst things that you can do. There's a kennels just down the road from me that its main advertising image is a picture of a dog with its face like squished into the side of the advertising board, and it's so upsetting to see every time I pass it. So that's a very roughly drawn version of the logo. So you can see the skills, the kind of tools that it's taken to do that, and how it was produced. It's got the kind of screen printed style that she talked about. It's got the shape of the kind of old school graphics that she spoke about. It's got that kind of Americana feel. It's not this sheep. It's much more of a Dutch spotted sheep. She did offer to pay me in lambs as well, which my wife is really keen for, but I'm not too sure about that. So yeah, as a designer, also it's really handy to send more than one image, more than one version. Not all the time. Sometimes it's better to just send one if you're really confident with it and you're really sure that that's what you're trying to sell to them. But because these were all kind of much of the same kind of theme, this is it's easy. I wouldn't mind if she chose any of these. They're all kind of based on the same kind of theme. But you can see, in some of them I've not included the tree line, which is quite important to her. So I think she'll probably rule these ones out instantly. So yeah, it's up to the client effectively. You can produce all you want. One thing I would say is don't ever send a client a piece of work that you're not happy with, because I guarantee you that is the one that they're going to choose. So last piece of advice. But yeah, that is me. I've rattled on for long enough, I think. And that should leave us hopefully with some time to answer any questions if there are any. I will stop sharing. That's me. Yeah, I mean, again, I come back to the idea of projects kind of dictating the design in some ways. So if for instance, the mid-steeple quarter font was constructed out of the premise of the project. So it's a construction project. It's about building blocks. It's about actually building physical things. So the idea of building each font with 4 blocks, so using the concept of quarters because of the name, and then building blocks because of the theme of the project, was kind of how the font kind of came about. So yeah, and again, even just choosing fonts for just little headings under fonts or anything like that, I choose it based on the kind of project that it is. If it's a contemporary, shiny, flashy project, you're gonna use something quite, sans serif and something that's just quite minimal and slick. And yeah, I kind of think just listen to the project and pull out the themes of the project, and it will kind of start pushing you in the right direction of what fonts to choose, I think. It's tricky. I've come across that a couple of times. Once I did actually just walk away from a project because I really didn't believe in the aesthetic that they were wanting to take it, and it also wasn't well paid enough for me to compromise on that. I think that's the kind of, if the money's good enough, then I'll take the hit, because in the end, if I don't like it, I don't have to put it on my portfolio. I don't have to put it on my website. If it's something that they're willing to pay for, then fine. It's something, you're kind of got to compromise in some places when it's the client's work at the end of the day. It's something that ideally you would have a client that would trust you and that would come to you and say, look, I like your work. I want you to kind of develop a visual style for me. But you do come across people that kind of want to play it being a designer. And it's just about having those kind of conversations and trying to be diplomatic about it. Yeah, I've had a recent client I've taken on had as part of a website that they've designed, and somebody within the team has built the website, and he's quite set in his mind about this is how it needs to look, but the rest of the team are trying to push him in the right direction. And they came to me saying he's quite stubborn. Can you have a word with him? And I just had a 10-15 minute chat with him and explained the idea behind what I was visualizing. And that was enough for him to kind of come on board and say, oh, actually, yeah, okay, I get why you want to use those visuals. It's not just a case of, I want to make it look better. It's like, this is why I want to make it look better. And making sure that you're kind of just communicating as best you can with your client.